Bada bing, bada boom.
Good evening. Good evening,
Good,
sir.
good evening, sir.
How we doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Yeah,
Doing good. How are you doing? Episode
doing
10.
good. Are we on 10 already?
Episode number 10, my friend.
Wow. I didn't even know we were that high already.
Yeah,
What the
crazy.
heck have we been talking about this whole
I
time?
have no clue, man. It's just passing me by every damn week. I say the same thing, but I can't believe it again.
Yeah, did sugar talk last week?
Yeah, I
That
had
was
our
a good
little
one.
sugar case study. What was the other thing that we mentioned that we were going to have a case study on next?
Someone asked a question at the end of that last one. I can't remember.
There's
Something that you
something,
wanted to talk about.
I know there was some topic that would be a good one to do. I can't remember what the hell it was. Oh, maybe it was insulin. Might have been insulin stuff.
Oh yeah, about insulin spiking and
Yeah,
all that.
that's a pretty common critique of sugar or carbs in general, is that it
Yeah,
affects insulin. So yeah, that would be I think a really good one to spend some time on because it is complex. You can just kind of like glaze over it if you want, but if you do want to really get into the weeds on it, and address like some of the big claims that, hey, insulin is what's making us fat, not calories. It's like, well, I would like to just say no and move on from there, but should probably address it a little more in detail. So I do think that would be a
yeah,
good
that's
case
fair.
study to do because it's a pretty popular one. Like this carb, I think it's called the insulin carb model for obesity, or the carb insulin model for
Yep,
obesity
heard of that one.
is like one of the bigger. It's got like one of the bigger I don't know what I'm gonna like cult following where they're like, yeah, like calories don't matter. This is what matters, right? Some people like to point to hormones, and it just still doesn't quite add up, as far as I'm concerned. But I love talking about that stuff. So I think that would be a good one, especially a good segue from case study number 1 on straight up sugar.
Mm. That'll be another one where some more blood will be shed, likely. Although I was surprised to see no one really wanted to come in and counter you on
Yeah,
sugar.
surprised that we didn't have any sugar
Yeah.
fiends or sugar haters in the chat telling me how sugar has wrecked their life, or it's like
Did
pissed
you say
off at them.
resurrected a life?
No, wrecked their life. Like, oh
Oh,
yeah,
wrecked it.
sugar wrecked me, man.
It does resurrect mine time and time again.
Sugar came in with its evil agenda and was like, fuck you, I'm here to fuck you up.
Well, we got some stuff to talk about today. We've this came up on I think what our second episode or third one. Whenever we were talking about Wendy's, I think we talked about briefly body mass index and
Yeah.
also body fat percentage and what's going on there. How do we measure these things? Obesity in general. What's going on with all that? So we have some stuff to cover today. Now I know you got some really cool stuff to go over. Me as well, but I know you will probably be the best person to start on BMI.
Yeah. BMI, I think we've referenced a whole bunch of times already. Basically
Yeah.
anytime that we're referencing obesity and kind of like the big um, trend that's happening in the developed, really everywhere, but I'll say like more so the developed world, more so than other places. We've definitely hinted or referenced to that being like our big target problem that we're trying to just like open up and talk about in a different way, shape, or form than the traditional, like, hey, eat less, move more, people yelling from the rooftops. Trying to give like a more nuanced take on it. And yeah, it is a big, heavy trend, man, it's just going up and to the right. It is a big problem, this this thing. And then
Wait.
it's
What's
not.
a big problem? The usage of BMI or body fat percentage
Oh,
and
yeah,
obesity
sorry.
in general?
I kind of went off the rails there a bit,
You're
but
good.
the trend of obesity in general
Yes.
is off the rails, and just
Yes.
like we've got an eye on it. We can chart it, we can look at it, we can even point to a whole bunch of the root causes, but we're not doing anything right now to slow it down. So BMI, that what was our question there? How do we measure obesity, or what is obesity? I think a lot of times, like when people hear like obesity, they just like have an image of like somebody who's way overweight or like a large person. And that's like, I guess, kind of accurate, but it's more so in general trying to target the accumulated fat. Like when we say obesity, it's referencing excess accumulated fat. Now, that's not really specifying where it is, and we'll get into that like as we go along here. The one kind of disconnect here is that when we measure obesity in terms of like all the data and all the trends, like when you look at a figure or a graph or a chart nowadays, we're usually using BMI to measure that or to indicate that. And if you know anything about BMI isn't really a direct measure of body composition or body fat. It's more of just a correlated value. So BMI, it's
Yeah,
been, I think it came around quite a while ago now, like 100 years, and it's
long
definitely
time
got,
ago.
right? There's some good things about it, and there's some bad things about it, just like everything. Like BMI is not good, BMI is not bad. It can be used in inappropriate manners to try to infer or to try to like diagnose things, and then it can be used in appropriate manners. So I like when it's used on like a large scale to try and look at a big population. There's definitely certain populations that aren't benefited by it, but let's talk about what the heck BMI is in general. Chat, if you guys are here, throw in what you think like BMI is and how it relates to body fat percentage. It's um, a ratio or an index between two things, between your weight and your height. Yeah, sure. We can definitely do some calculations in this chat. So human hex trafficker, if you want, you can just throw out some random numbers for examples. I'll throw out a couple as well, and we can go and we can calculate it. It's a very simple calculation. There's calculators online that you can just plug your values in, or you could go do this on your own. It's a simple
I'm gonna do it for me. I don't think I've ever done it for myself.
division problem. So yeah, let's do it together. It is weight or your body mass in kilograms over your height in meters squared. So the units that we end up coming out with are kilograms per meter squared. So basically what this index is tracking is the amount of mass that you have in a certain area, right? And the assumption here is that in general, the more mass that you pack in to like the same amount of unit area, in general, that means that the amount of fat that person is carrying is going up, right? If I try to stuff 100 pounds into 1 foot of space, it's probably going to have a worse outcome than 100 pounds going into 3 or 4 feet of space. That's
Hmm.
not a really good like realistic representation. So think of a 6 foot tall person, right? If we try to fit 300 pounds onto a 6 foot frame, it's more likely that there's going to be more fat in 300 pounds on a 6 foot frame than 200 pounds on a 6 foot frame. So that's kind of like the basic underlying assumption of the way that this BMI index works when we're trying to measure or trying to infer obesity per se.
I got a 20.2.
20.2. 20.2 sounds like a pretty nice number if you subscribe to BMI being kind of like one of like a good value to
It's the
track.
first time I've ever used it. You know me. We'll
Hmm.
go off of body fat, but that's now this system obviously has its pros and cons, right?
Hmm. Big time.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Some pros being it's extremely easy to calculate. All you need to know is your weight and your height, right? Kilograms per meter squared. So 20 is right in the middle of what they suggest as regular or what they classify as regular. I think 18 to 25 is regular, under 18 is underweight, 25 to 30 is overweight, and then once you hit 30, that's where this magical line of obesity is according to a lot of these like data aggregators, right?
Mhm.
So like the World Health Organization, CDC, they classify that number 30 as being like, oh, you have now transitioned into the magical land of obesity, right? So is that useful per se? It definitely can be. Again, especially when we're looking at population data, I think it's very useful. When we come down to the individual level, it might be a good place to start, but it's not like an indicator to say like, hey, you're obese, you're fucked, like you're going to have massive health problems. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just
Sure.
more likely, right? So obesity is correlated with a whole bunch of issues. And BMI is correlated with actual obesity, right? The actual adiposity that is underlying how much weight you are fitting into your height, right? So
That makes
if
sense.
so let's say you end up with a 30 and you're like, holy smokes, I'm deemed obese. Well, that might just be a really good red flag to hold up and be like, hey, my BMI is kind of high. Maybe I should go look in to see if that actually translates to any negative health outcomes. And the way that that can translate into negative health outcomes is typically through affecting your blood lipids or your cholesterol levels. That's usually the most direct line, the direct mechanism. So it's not like BMI is like a bad guy, right? And as soon as you hit
Yeah.
30, it's like, holy smokes, now that you're 30 BMI, bad shit's going to happen, right? It's not, it will depend on a whole bunch of things that are going on more so internally to that individual. So again, if you're an individual and you look at this number and it like really significantly affects like your mindset, then I would say like just you can just throw it out. But if it's again, it's just data that you can use as an indicator to maybe go do a deeper dive on things. So BMI, I would say overall is like fairly useful, especially when looking at a large population. If you're an individual, it's not a number that I place
Hmm.
a ton of value in, but
Yeah.
if you've never looked, like you've never even looked at yours before,
I've never
right?
looked at it before. I
You've
never
never
even.
looked
I
at it
just typed
before.
it in for the first time.
Because there's not much you can do if you just look at a BMI value, right? If I look at my individual BMI value and I see it's 25, there's no real action steps from that. It's like, do I want it to go down? Do I need it to go down? Like, why? So I would say once you're approaching 30, like again, there's a greater likelihood that you'll benefit from it going down, but that's not always the case. It's just correlated with that. So correlation, we have to be very careful when we're using values that are not like directly indicative of what they're trying to measure. So BMI is one of those. So we just have to be careful when applying like certain, I guess, certain conclusions or like trying to draw conclusions. Just be like, hey, be a little bit careful. Because one thing I imagine that comes to mind right away is like, well, what if you just have a bunch of muscle on that frame? What if you're 6 feet tall and you got a bunch of muscle on your frame, so you weigh
Yeah.
250 pounds, and your BMI says you're 30? Well, are you still obese if your body fat percentage is 10%, but your BMI is 30? Which one is indicating obesity now? Should we go off BMI or should we go off of body fat? Right. So that is the biggest drawback to BMI in my opinion is that it's not great for specific populations. And then for an individual, it's not necessarily like something that you can use to like move forward.
Yeah, it's like a catch-all bracket. It's almost like the RSI indicator. It's like
Hmm.
if something's oversold or potentially like underweight, it doesn't mean it's going to be that way forever. That it's actually correct. It's just an indicator that you could be in a range that's oversold. You could be in a range that's overweight, but you just have to apply other tools potentially like body fat
Hmm.
percentage to really get a bit more specific to the use case that you're looking to do, especially as an individual. But that makes sense that it's a much more simple way to aggregate the data and look at trends over larger populaces, like you said, to make sense of what's going on there.
Yeah. So BMI, let's just try and pull this up really quick and I'll try to make it really clean and clear what the difference is between BMI versus body fat percentage. So here I had just started typing up a few things that go into like the body fat percentage calculation, or like when we're giving somebody a percent value versus BMI, right, is simply your mass over your height. So your mass in kilos over your height in meters squared. So this gives us kilograms per meter squared. And in general, they'll tell you you'll become more and more overweight as that value goes up. So it's just a function of if you have a larger mass over a smaller height value, this value is going to go up, right? So if we're trying to store more fat, I'm just going to draw two blocks here, right? If you have somebody who's 5 feet tall and 6 feet tall, your BMI value is going to go up if both of these people or both these individuals weigh the same, right? So if you're trying to fit more mass into a smaller area, that's the assumption here, or the underlying mechanism is that you're more likely to be carrying more fat, which means you're more likely to be trending, or I would say moving towards some negative health outcomes that are associated with that fat. So it's not a guarantee that there is more fat here or even that something bad is happening. It's just more likely, right? Correlated. When we're talking about percent body fat, again, it's a ratio, but it is looking more so at the actual fat. Now, it is kind of tough to do that, but the way it does that is by measuring two different categories, your fat mass versus your fat-free mass. So let's say if you weigh 100 kilos and 10 of those kilos is fat mass and 90 of them is fat-free mass, well, guess what? Of your total body mass, you are 10% body fat. So this is, again, a very, very simple calculation, but body fat is actually investigating the amount of fat somebody is carrying. If you look over at the BMI calculation, we've got no reference or no indication of fat mass here. None. We just have a correlation, right? In general, as your mass goes up, fat tends to go up as well. It's not perfect, but again, when we're looking at big populations, it's pretty darn good. The reason that this is used is because it's so easy to use. All I need to do is survey people and get their height and their weight. Simple. Now I can look at a massive population really, really quick. It's much more difficult to go and try to actually measure the fat within an individual. There's a whole bunch of ways to do it, and none of them are perfect. So even if you have body fat percentage, again, it's not a perfect measure, and the way or the mechanism by which it ends up affecting health comes in a negative way is typically through affecting your blood lipids. So your cholesterol levels, your LDL, your HDL, your triglycerides. That's what the main mechanism is. So those are kind of like the two, I would say, like most common metrics that are used to try to indicate whether somebody is obese or not. BMI says if you are greater than or equal to 30, that's the magic number to be obese. 18 to 25 is considered regular, right? Again, these are just categories for large scale populations to try to like make, uh, I guess, conclusions and inferences at a large scale. As soon as we get down to the individual level, so if you're looking at your BMI, so I think I just saw a comment that just says I'm normal, overweight, sad face. It's not, if it makes you have a sad face, again, I would encourage you to just not even look at this number, but try to remove that from the equation and just remember that this is just purely data that hopefully will help you move in the right direction. So if you wanted a clearer picture of if you are potentially at risk, the best thing I would recommend is to go take a look at, go get a blood panel. That is where some of the actual causation is coming from when it comes to negative health outcomes and obesity. Obesity is correlated with all of these different things. It's not necessarily causal, if that makes sense. So hopefully that's really, really clear between body fat percentage versus what BMI is. BMI, again, when you see all these values, if you see a chart or anything of a population or a country or a lot of people, they're probably using BMI. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just the metric that we have available to us. And I would agree that it's pretty good for large population data.
You know, I think is really probably the tougher spot is because, and this is going into a whole other conversation we don't have to cover all tonight, but the education to what people deem is the definition of BMI and how it impacts them mentally when a doctor may diagnose someone as being obese and says, hey, you are of greater than 30 BMI, you need to do X, Y, and Z things. And then the person doesn't really have understanding of what that means. They don't have understanding of body composition. They don't have an understanding of body fat percentage at all. You know, so they just think high is bad, low is good, which I guess can be applied, but I just feel like there's not enough middle ground so people can really articulate the nuances between these certain things that you're going over, you know, because honestly, one of the biggest things that I see issues with the clientele I work with is a very warped perception of what body composition is and what overall health is and how that actually is looking conveyed on somebody, whether it be a normal person, whether it be a professional athlete. It's totally just fucked, honestly, especially for guys. Like girls, they just want to look and feel a certain way. Props to you ladies. Thank you. You just want to look and feel a certain way, regardless of what that scale kind of notates. But with guys, there's a lot of ego involved and they want to like be a certain number, even though it makes like zero sense. It's like magical fairy tales that guys believe in, where they're like, oh, I have to be above 200 pounds or I have to be this and that. And they just have really a lack of understanding of how they will want to look and feel and what that actually correlates to as it pertains to maybe a body fat percentage or even what their BMI number would be and what weight that would put them at. Because I know a lot of people talk to me about BMI and they're like, there's no way I could be that weight. and have my BMI be that low. They're crazy. That's not possible. And to me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it is. Like
Yeah.
obviously it's possible, but we've been so kind of conditioned to be okay with things. That's a whole other topic again there. But the point is people are very almost to the point where they're just not believing this stuff anymore. It has become so norm to be above us. That's like hearing about a male, for example, that's 6 foot tall and 160 pounds is like the most unheard of thing of the planet. It's like, guys, professional wide receivers in the NFL are 160, 170 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think you guys are falling into that mix? You know what I mean? It's just, that's I think if there's more education on that, people would have a more reasonable and healthy understanding of where they would like to be. Because people hold themselves back too on their goals because like, well, I can't ever be below 200. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I guess we're just going to be hanging out at 30 plus BMI, So it's just almost adds a layering to the problem. And of course, I don't know who would come in and have that conversation. Maybe the school systems, I'm not sure, but doctors are not, from what I've heard from my clientele, they're not having that conversation with people. It's very brief, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense because doctors aren't with somebody for very long. They're only
Yeah.
there for what, 10 minutes every 6 months, maybe even less these days. I mean, my one client tried to get with her doctor and it took her like 4 months to get an appointment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really, really good that you're going over some of this stuff so people can understand that it's not so black and white and there are nuances to these things. So don't like automatically put you in a category that's good. Just because I have a BMI of 20 doesn't mean I'm in overall good health, right? I could be in a weight range that's healthy, but
Mm-hmm.
still have a very high body fat percentage based on
Yeah.
how much muscle I have, and vice versa too.
Yeah. Yeah. So the categories. So yeah, exactly what you're saying at the end there is something that just kind of jumped into my head is that in general, like as you move up the scale or as you move higher in value, I guess, so as you move this direction down the scale, the general trend is there are more negative outcomes, right? Again,
Yeah.
this is a correlation. As you move up towards the lower numbers, the general trend is that there are better health outcomes. Now, again, these are just trends, just
Yeah.
correlations. Because if you think like being of a low index when it comes to mass compared to your height does not guarantee you are healthy. All it is an index of mass to height. We're not looking at anything causal or anything that's really indicative of the underlying environment of that individual, right? All it is correlation data. And I think that's one of the biggest, yeah, like hangups that people have is because they'll go to their doctor and like this is literally a diagnostic tool. They'll use it to diagnose obesity and overweight. And they'll be like, hey, you're 26 on the scale. You, sir, are overweight, or you are. And then there's a few different classifications of obesity. If you hit 35, you're class 2. If you hit 40, I think is the next level, then you're class 3. So you might hit 35 and your doctor might call you severely obese. So for some people, again, that might be the wake up call or the red flag or whatever to like actually move the needle or change lifestyle. But for other people, it might be like, yo, like fuck you, right? Might be like, what? I'm severely obese. I think you're just muted, Ryan.
Sorry, buddy. I was
That's all
saying
right.
that, no, you're right. That's a triggering conversation
Mm-hmm.
that if not done in the proper context or without the right support, etc., this could be almost like a spiraling effect that I've seen with a lot of people too. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's not on the users, the person's individual responsibility to take care of themselves always, obviously, but we can't just like ditch people to the curb and be like, hey, go fix yourself, because that ain't working either, guys. Like the doctors and dietitians are doing that currently, and it's getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a super triggering conversation if not done very carefully. And once again, not a doctor's job to know how to do that. They're just giving people facts. This is what we're seeing. You need to do this. You should probably do this. If not, here's what's going to go down. And if that happens, I'll be here. And that's a very reactionary approach. And that's that. We covered that in one of our previous episodes. But yeah, it's super, super triggering as a conversation. And that's why like we always talk about there's no like intermediary in between all of this, right? From educational standpoint, from like what we learned growing up, which was not calorie counting. It was not, manipulating our metabolisms. It was not, how to hang out in a proper body fat range, regardless of what's going on in the world. And then you come up into, consistent health problems. And then you have doctors and dietitians, which are kind of that weird, last resort kind of reactionary based measure. There's no preventative in the middle. We always talk about preventative, of course, but yeah, it's a difficult conversation and certainly a difficult one to have when it's kind of at a point where the person is super high in the BMI, because that's typically what things get to when someone actually has that conversation with somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's complex. It's a tough situation. I think it's and every
Oh, very
time,
complex,
right,
super layered.
when we get into the weeds of talking about it like this, like sometimes to me it feels like so simple, and then other times to me it feels, yeah, like so diluted and just like so like just yeah, so layered and just so complex where it's like, holy shit, like what do we actually do? Because like again, like a lot of these tools are like they're not bad. They're not like they're useful, but if it's
Yeah.
not really like moving the needle or impacting like people in like in the positive direction, like should we do we continue like diagnosing people as obese? I don't know. Is it useful? Like it's tough to say. It's so tough to say, man. Very like
Dude,
it's
that could be a
such an
good segue into what the trends actually are right now.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, let's move that way because yeah, the trends. This is our one of our biggest messages, I think, is that hey, yo, we need to
Yeah.
friggin' try something a little bit different, a little more nuanced. I think this is our general perspective is that there's not enough manpower to like take the most effective route when it comes to like um going about or making change in this area. It's really easy to be like, yo, if you move your number this way, it's better. Or if you move your number this way, it's worse. Or move more, eat less. Like that's really easy to do, right? But
Yeah.
I think we've both agreed that it takes, I think, a lot more manpower and man hours, and we just like that's just not occurring. Like I guess the industry is not that big. There's not enough people willing to put in the time and sit and like try to trudge through a whole bunch of the nuance and layers that are present for like every single individual because that's where like
Yeah.
the needle starts getting moved is when like yeah like this kind of shit that you do.
Yeah, there's not enough care and effort to go, like you said, through the layering and the complexities, especially in like the 30 to 60-year-old demographic,
Yeah.
there are so many complexities there now. There are so many underlying issues. There are so many societal issues, infrastructural issues going on that are making this difficult to offset without coming up with a brand new industry with people doing kind of what it is that I do, which is literally typing to people every single day, talking to them on the phone at least once a week, going over the psychological relationships with food, the charting analysis, all this stuff. And I don't think there's the manpower. Straight up,
Yeah.
I don't think there's manpower. And this could be a whole other episode, but my short take is I think the best bet now, man, is pending people's relationship with children and food and health, which, in my opinion, if we're allowing children to take control of a lot of their own things these days or play Fortnite with thousands of people and have an iPhone 12, hopefully we could trust them with, a food tracking app. But the point is, I think in the educational side of things for children, that is the best way to combat it, is just go to the next generation coming up that's more malleable and can be manipulated in a positive way, right? Because none of us grew up doing this stuff, at least for the most part. We
Hmm.
just ate whatever it is that we had and that was it. No real knowledge. And you just hope the hell it worked out. And hopefully you played sports, you did something to stay active, because shit, it's more difficult these days. We're less active than we used to be, higher
Hmm.
nutritional intake, and of course, the body fat trend is going up and obesity trend is going up. But yeah, I think personally that would be the only place to start. I know legally that poses issues and all sorts of stuff as pertains to the educational system. It's a mess, but I think that'd be the only place to start, honestly, to really help. Because I think anything else, the higher range, we're just gonna have to unfortunately face the heat that's coming based on what we're seeing right now.
Yep.
There's a lot of heat coming. This is the rug pull that nobody is talking about, and it's very, very obvious. The chart is right there in front of you. You're like, this is obviously a rug pull. Everybody's going to get wrecked here, and
Hmm.
it's going to be everybody's responsibility collectively when that happens. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
because I mean, dude, everybody's impacted by this stuff. I feel like almost everybody's family has somebody that they know is impacted by, whether it be high blood pressure, cardiac disease, diabetes, or just obesity in general. You
Yep.
know, for sure. So yeah, dude, it's definitely a tough one, man. It's a tough one. I don't know. I can't think of anybody that's out there fighting a good fight outside of like maybe Dr. Lane Norton, but he's like too much on the privatized side of thing. He's not going to care to go in and like shift some of the stuff I talked about.
Yeah, they're doing private coaching, so
Yeah.
they're charging upwards of like 3,
And they got an
4.
app too. They got the Carbon app coach and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think
Yeah.
he's gonna like want to put his legacy on the line to be a martyr, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because that's what you kind of gotta be, either very much so politically speaking in a good spot
Yeah.
to sway, or have connections, or be a martyr for this. And I just don't think he's got the care to do it. It's not really his fight to fight, to be honest with you, like for what he cares about and stands for. But if there was somebody, we would know. It would be obvious. Let's put it that way. If there was a
Mm-hmm.
Richard Hart in the obesity space, we would know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The best way to word it, man. Because
Yeah.
it'd be nothing but truth, transparency, and a care for people and keeping it real and preventing people from getting wrecked.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're doing here in the crypto space. That's why me and you, Exercise, are here doing this for Discourse Syndicate and the people following, because this is going to hurt feelings, but it's going to prevent you from getting wrecked.
Yeah.
So it's important stuff.
Yeah. Should we pull up some of this freaking data?
Yeah.
Or
You can share my screen if you want.
Sure, let's do it.
And there's a good comment from BitFinesse about the Surgeon General.
Yeah, is that this last one?
Yeah. If these people would eat healthily, they wouldn't be coming to the doctor's office. They won't do it. So we treat with prescriptions. Man, that's a whole other conversation. Prescription-based medications in America, man. That's a whole other one. But yeah, I mean, you're talking a whole industry that relies on this pattern to continue to get worse and or just stay flat. You know, just stay where it is manageable. But here's the deal, guys. This is basically a heat map. You know, the darker the color, the higher the obesity prevalence. I think dark red is over 40% or equal to. And this is from 2020. Actually, I did find one that was 2020, dude. This one's overall obesity for 2020. Cool. Okay, guys, this is for 2020 based by state. So what you need to understand here is the trend is that we are already at 30% and above in almost 50% of the states. And the ones that are outlying that are above 40%. I think the data for, hold on. Here we go. This is what I really wanted to show first and highlight this. Percent of adults age 20 and over with obesity are 42.5%. This is in 2017, 2018, guys. This is even old data from the CDC. Why they're not updating it, I'm not sure. Maybe there's issues with them collecting the data or what have you. I'm not actually sure how they get it. But I can tell you that things have gotten exponentially worse in 2020 and 2021 with the lockdowns and the higher nutritional intake and the lower activity levels. So we are well beyond the 50% mark. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw above 60% on this mark here. So this is in 2017, 2018. And the last one I wanted to show you was, here we go. Okay, so this is from PubMed.gov, guys. This is basically what they said here was a projection. And their projection is the overall prevalence of obesity is projected to increase from around 12% in 1992 to 41% by 2022 in men, which I can assure you we're there for sure right now. And from 21% to 78% in women. I'm not sure how true that is. I know for sure the 41% men is a pretty safe bet. The fact that they put 70% for women is alarming, but they also said women had a much higher projected prevalence than men, particularly in age groups 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and 55 to 64 years, and that effective national strategies are needed to reduce or halt the projected rise in obesity prevalence. Guys, this will never make the light of day in news. This will never make the light of day, honestly, anywhere, even when it was a leading comorbidity of a virus that we are still going through right now. So I don't know what my main comment to make on this before I pass back to you, Exercise, is I don't know what needs to happen before someone starts caring about this more. Like I can't imagine how much worse the numbers could get up until the point where the healthcare system can't even support, right, with a reactionary based strategy, what is going on with it. I'm not sure what needs to happen.
Yeah, man, that number, that projection for the females, the 78% projection is
scary, dude.
Yeah, it's scary. For real.
Here's
that was from 1990 to
1992 to 2022.
Yeah, that's crazy. And
then they also have a heat map from 2019 of either adolescents, young children, and adults who are also classified as obese. So you have, this was the crazy one that I saw. You have 3 to 23-month-year-olds who have a height for length that is higher than it should be. And you already see the trends picking up to almost 20% on some of the higher obesity states like Alabama, Texas, Iowa, Virginia, Massachusetts, some of the more traditional ones that you're seeing here. When we just go to the adult section, you can see most of this is covered by green and blue, which is 30 to 40%, once again, from 2018. So the amount of this that's going to go a lot higher. I'm not sure when the CDC is going to come out with more of that. I know they come out with preliminary studies showing the percentage increases, but not by state. But the point is this, to Exercise's point, if this is even helping that we're telling people that they're obese, I don't think it is. Honestly, I think at some point it's going to be numbing, and 40% is going to be 60 to 80%. And it just won't matter as long as reactionary-based healthcare measures can handle it. Like I just don't know what that break point would need to be honest. I don't want it to get to a break point, but it is so going up so parabolically and in a trajectory that's so fast. Like it would have to be literally unparalleled measures to come in to stop it.
Yeah, it's alarm. Yeah, it's alarming, man. And I'm always just at a lot. At times I think it's so simple, but then I'm like, well, what the fuck? We've been like, what is the next step? It's got to be something different at this point, but what exactly that is, like, it's tough. So the projections are like some of the craziest, and just
And
waiting
they're
on.
true. That's the thing. These are true. We literally were already over 40%. So saying that this is likely well above 50 and or above 60.
Yeah.
Based on the data that we got from, they had childhood obesity status updates from 2021, I thought recently. It's not in this one here. But some of the more recently posted CDC stuff shows some of the rates going up really fast again. And it's just crazy because this is a CDC who's getting a lot of attention recently, and they also publish this. This is all very public. It's not like they're hiding it per se, but obviously it's not a cause for concern. When it's like, how? This is the number one killer in the whole, at least the United States it is. I don't have the stats for other countries, but for the United States, heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes are the three, with obviously obesity being the main causation or correlation, if you will, all those, the number one killer in America. And it has been for a long time. And it's still the number one, and it's only gotten a lot worse, especially recently. So that's where I say the kids, man, because they're malleable, and they could be taught. When you have an adult who's 50 years old and has 20 to 30 years of bad habits ingrained in them, that is a Rubik's Cube of fuckery. That is not at all the same situation as little Johnny, who's 15, 16 and can operate a phone really well and can, whip out a phone app and be like, oh, okay, this is pretty normal. Okay, this is normal. And it's kind of teaching someone a bank account early, right? We can trust someone with a bank account at 18, but, understanding this is apparently like against the word. It's not really great to do. But, I don't even know how much of it's like we're against our kids or the children knowing about this, because they do learn, what is it, the MyPlate structure from the federal government. I don't know if you've heard of MyPlate before.
Yeah, I think it used to be the pyramid, right? But now it's MyPlate. I think that was a Michelle Obama thing.
Yeah, and they swapped from the food pyramid to MyPlate, because when I did presentations for school districts for my previous corporate health and wellness company, we would present and have to go over the MyPlate stuff. And I would always think like, dude, this is the dumbest thing on the planet. You guys ready to see this? Let's pull up MyPlate. Let's pull up MyPlate real quick. Here we go.
Yeah.
Here we go. So if you are a, hold on a second. If you are a 14-year-old, and your family eats fast food typically, or has Doritos on the floor, or has, well, not the floor, the bag, I mean, or whatever. What is this actually doing for anybody? This was maybe relevant in the 90s.
Yeah.
The 90s. That was 30 years ago. I was born in 89. I'm an old dude. I'm 32.
Hmm.
And we had 3 meals a day in the 90s. 3. Now we skip breakfast. Kid has a Monster energy drink, has a a bag of chips, and then orders Grubhub for dinner, and then maybe some beers and alcohol. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but you get the point. This is doing nobody any good here. No one is going to retain this. No one is going to have any use of this. And this is what our children are taking in. So my point is, I think there's a lot of growth that could happen here, because give me your thoughts on this. I'm not sure what the takeaway of this could possibly be in our current cultural environment these days.
Yeah. To me, like, I guess, like, if I'm being nice, a good takeaway is to mix up like what you eat. Like,
Oh, of course. I think the
eat,
portions make sense based on the sizing that they did there on purpose, and then kind of mixing all that in a way that makes sense.
right?
Sure.
So eat a diet that's like from a variety of sources might be like a decent takeaway here, but like outside of that, like, yeah, I've never really been a fan of like of this stuff, like whether it was the pyramid or the plate or
The pyramid was
the
bad.
group or like whatever the fuck. Like, make sure you get 6 servings from this group and 9 servings from this
Dude,
group
yeah,
and
man.
two
Like,
servings from this group. It's like,
it's like,
well,
dude, people in Texas, I'm in Texas, guys.
mhm,
People in Texas are going to Whataburger. They're not having a plate that looks like this. They're not. So the sooner we can understand where to start with the conversation to create a more plausible solution, that is what we need to do.
mhm,
And if a kid who is in the car who has no choice is going to Whataburger, but they have an iPhone 12 and can learn how to track this stuff and just weigh themselves every day and understand these things. Once again, we're getting kind of out of the subject here. I don't want to get straight too far, but yeah, the point is there's an obvious lack. There's like this big gray area. You know what I mean? Like, we kind of lightly touch on it when people are younger, and then nothing at all until you go into the doctor and they're like, yeah, your BMI is going up. It's like, dude, this person's like 35, 40. It is not in a spot where they're ready to retain new information and totally pivot their lifestyle
yeah,
at all. This is the worst time to have the conversation. They're older. They're likely stressed. They're pissed off with what's been going on in the world the past 2 years since 2020. Not the best time to tell them to swap out all their habits. I can tell you from experience, it's
mhm,
difficult. So this
yeah,
plate is screwing people because it
mhm,
does nothing. So
yeah,
you wonder why it started that way.
yeah. You know what this like directly reminds me of is like well, this is like what all the goobers do. I refer to like the government as goobers in general. Like, they've got good intentions usually, right? Like, usually they have like decent intentions, right? Like, I think Michelle Obama's intention here was to
Yeah.
try to create healthier or better outcomes. That's fine. This is the problem with goobers, is that they stop right there, right? They don't really have the foresight to like actually go and like do like some actual like A/B testing to determine what the outcome is, right? Your intentions. This is somebody helped me out with this quote the other time. It actually might have even been bit finesse. Good intentions pave the way to hell, or something like that, right? So they are constantly like dressing up their policies with good intentions, which again, that's not a bad thing to have good intentions. That it's to be realistic, like with what the intention like leads to, right? Or what the outcome will be, because there will always be unintended outcomes that you will not foresee. So even if you're over here saying like we have the best intention, it's not good enough. Um, so what this directly reminds me of is the prescription in like the exercise world, right? The
Yeah.
prescriptions that are given out in the
Mhm.
exercise world are like, I mean, they're good, right? Like, if you adhere to those prescriptions, you'll have good outcomes. The problem is nobody is fucking adhering to them, guys. Like, I
Yeah.
get it. I get it that it's a
Nobody
good
wants to be the
idea,
bad guy right now, man. Nobody wants
right?
to have that honest conversation.
And I get that it's a good idea to have 150 minutes of, activity a week. I get that it's a good idea to have 2 to 3 days of resistance training. I get that it's a good idea, 5 days of cardio or whatever. That's what the current is. Add it up 7 days a week. I get that it's a good idea. Nobody is fucking doing it. Just like this plate. This plate is a good idea, right? It's if you adhere to that plate every single plate of your life, you'll almost certainly have good outcomes.
It'd be
Nobody's
tough to
fucking
mess it up. Yeah.
right. Nobody's fucking doing
But
it.
that's the thing, man. It's like you're teaching someone how to farm, but then you
Yeah.
tell them to go invest properly in cryptocurrency. It doesn't compute. You're giving them the wrong skill sets. It doesn't apply to the cultural environment we are living in right now. It's like,
Yeah.
they know this too, but they don't want to actually care enough to open up that can of
Yeah.
worms to have the conversation, right? Once again, that honest conversation is difficult to have. It's so difficult to have, and nobody in politics wants to have it. Nobody in the school system, the education system wants to have it because they're going to piss off parents. They're going to piss off all these people and all these things. But it's like, guys, what's worse? Half the country dying from obesity, or just having an honest conversation so people can be healthy at an earlier age and start there at least, because good luck at the higher age range. It is so difficult and has gotten exponentially more difficult after the lockdowns, if you will, with what went down in the current situation that everybody's living in these days. People are overworked, they're stressed, they're tired, they're gaining more weight, they're eating out more often, their activity levels are lower. The list goes on. Once you gain momentum, just like you would in the positive direction, it keeps growing. And in the negative direction, it keeps growing too. And we've seen that negative growth. So yeah, dude, it kills me because they know better and they see the trend. It's obvious. It's like the chart's going straight down, dude. There's not one conversation. That's probably the most appalling part about it. And nobody has actually cared to step up yet. It's nuts, man. I'll be transparent. I had 2 people in my family that I lost recently due to one of the, I won't say the name, but one of the viruses going around. And they also have heavy implications with obesity as well. And it's tough, man, to see that stuff because so much of this is preventable. And it's like, when is the right time for the tough conversation? After someone passes? No. That is not the right time to have it. It should be way before. If we care about people, we need to have it now. Because if this doesn't wake people up, man, the next thing that comes over, we've said, you've heard me say this before a couple of times. The next thing that comes over, or anything like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, that should be enough to scare somebody. You'd think we're gonna get wrecked, dude. Rug pulled.
Yeah.
Rug pulled. If this turns into really 60 to 80% of the population is obese, nothing operates. Economy, nothing. Done. So the fact that this is still not talked about is beyond me. But we could switch to this. I have this. I don't want to have this, picture of half naked men up here for too long without at least addressing it. For the gentlemen in this chat, it is good to know about body fat, and feel free, exercise, to come in, either correct me or just give me your feedback and just thoughts. It's good to have an understanding. And this is just a picture I pulled from Google, right? A body fat chart, if you will. It's not going to be entirely accurate. The way you hold body fat is very, very unique to you. The point is going off of ranges, I found, works really well. So, okay, if I want to look like this, I should probably aim to be around this range. It'll get me pretty close. And then when you get close, then you can kind of understand, okay, I may need to lose 3 to 4 more pounds to take that last little bit off here or whatever. Here's the deal. This to me is a better understanding of how you're going to look and feel. And it doesn't go off of a number. It goes off of the way you look. Nothing can hide that or manipulate that. You either look the way you want to look or you don't, right? Nobody's weighing you out on the beach. So if there's a guy, they're like, oh my God, haha, that guy only weighs 165 pounds, but he's a professional athlete and looks like a Greek god. It's like, do people really care? I don't know. That's up to you to only decide, I guess. But the point is these are really helpful. I recommend you guys looking at them. There's a bunch of different versions. This is one I found that was at least somewhat accurate. And it gives you an idea that, like, hey, if I look like a guy in the 20% body fat to 40% body fat range, we're talking about 30 to 50 pounds of weight loss. Period. That's the way it's going to go. So if that puts you below 200 or puts you below 180, that's pretty normal. And I suggest, if you're ever concerned about that, look at professional athletes and what they weigh, and make sure they're not NFL linebackers on steroids, please. Look at UFC fighters are a good one. Like Conor McGregor. I think he weighed what in the featherweight? He was like 145?
Yeah, I
Something
think
like that?
they weigh in at 145.
Yeah. Look at the way they look, man.
Hmm.
A lot of guys would love to look like that. Don't let the number hold you back. Don't let the ego hold you back on these things.
Yeah.
People don't care about your number that you weigh. They care about the way you look and feel, what you represent. So this is a helpful indicator that I found. And I wouldn't go out and try to figure out your exact body fat percentage, because to me, that's a waste of time. There's a few ways of doing it, but it's not going to be super accurate. And to me, and once again, either look the part or you don't. So if you're like, oh man, like my arms are all in, they look good, but my stomach and my back, it's just still not there yet. You got to keep losing weight, period. It's not going to come linear. It's an order of operations thing in which it comes off. So You just got to keep losing. So if you lose weight and your whole body's good, but you still got a little flub by your stomach and you're at 160 and you're like, man, I don't want to be 150. There's no way I could go that low. It's like, dude, it's not going to come from areas you already lost on if you're doing it correctly. It's going to come from the areas that are typically the toughest to lose, which is your upper legs and your lower stomach. But the point is this is, I think, can give you a different perspective on what you actually want to achieve and what you may actually have to weigh to get there. So don't let the numbers hold you back from the success that you want, is what I'm really trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, using the mirror is a great tool, especially like if you don't really have any like issues with the way with like measuring yourself against an image day in and day out. It's a really good tell for that individual. Things that are really, really cheap to use and easy to use to consistently measure this progress. A measuring tape, just take very, very simple circumference measurements. Waist is probably the most important one or most useful one.
Yeah.
And waist plus a picture in the mirror, and you'll have
Yep.
plus the way you feel is a great way to measure your progress. Yeah, so anytime you see like these are super popular. They're not bad, right? But like the guy over in the top left, like he could be 5 to 6. So don't take any of these numbers too seriously. It's a
Yeah.
general trend, right? But just to understand where you are most likely at, I think this is a pretty fair picture. Like if you're looking in the mirror and you look like the bottom right, you're you are probably at higher risk, or I would say you are at higher risk for some shitty things to potentially happen. It's not guaranteed. I'm not saying guaranteed you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke or one of those big things, but you
Yeah.
are at an elevated risk. All right, so that's the big correlation causation conversation or a relationship that I was trying to mention earlier. And if you don't understand the difference between correlation and causation, there's a whole bunch of videos on it. I highly recommend you looking it up. The example that I always give in usually when I give this lab, we do a lab where we do a whole bunch of different mechanisms to measure body fat, or a whole bunch of using 3 or 4 different technologies, because there's 10 ways to, maybe more. There's probably more than that by now. There's so many different ways to try to measure body fat percentage, and none
Yeah.
of them are perfect. They all have fairly
Yeah. So
large
don't even
standard
bother, guys.
deviations or standard errors. So again, like, is it useful to know like to the percentage what you are in terms of body fat? Like maybe, or like like if you're trying to get on stage for a bodybuilding competition or something like that, like maybe, right? But again, it's just a general indicator or maybe a red flag to be like, hey, I'm somewhere in this range, maybe I should lower that, or I'm somewhere in this range, maybe I should increase that. Just a general starting point so you have awareness of what, like, the direction that you need to move or the direction that you want to move.
100%. You had some
Um,
good comments in there too about it.
Yeah, let's pull some of those up. That example I was going to give for correlation causation is it's a pretty silly one, but in the summertime, murder rates go up. In the summertime, ice cream sales go up. Are the ice cream sales causing the murder to go up? It
How good
should
is the
be.
ice cream?
It's shitty. So people are pissed. So they're right. It's like a pretty ludicrous example, but that
Yeah.
is what correlation is as ice cream sales are rising throughout summertime, murder is also rising. But just because they're rising alongside each other does not mean that one is causing the other, right? Same thing with obesity. As your obesity goes up, or your obesity rate, right? So as your body fat, your BMI, or your quote unquote obesity increases, the chance, or like the rate at which heart attack happens goes up. The rate at which stroke happens goes up, but it's not causal, right? You can have somebody who's overweight their whole life live longer than a skinny person. It is like,
Yep.
that's a pretty normal phenomenon to have happen. And what is actually causing some of these negative outcomes is that internal environment, most likely the blood lipids. Not always, but that's usually the first place to go look. Um, so I did pull this up just a second ago, so thank you, MT Coiner. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yes, 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 I 100% agree. I always get pissed at goobers for doing this shit, for just like dressing up policies and good intentions and not really caring what the outcome is. They have good intentions. So yeah, I that shit drives me nuts. Greens are hard for me due to having Crohn's. Some greens make me very sick very quick. What is a good alternative? Ooh, so anything usually that is fairly easy to digest, I would definitely, like if you have full-blown Crohn's, like your doctor will have some good resources for you. The first thing that I think of is white rice.
That's a
Unless
good
you
one.
have like an adverse effect to white rice, then I would like stay away. So probably a little bit of trial and error for you here, but if you're looking for like some sort of carb, is what I'm guessing, you might have problems getting in white rice, potatoes, right? It doesn't have to be a grain. I'm not sure if you were referencing that My Plate picture, but it's not like you have to have grains in your day-to-day life.
Yep.
It's right. That's again a very, very like old school way of thinking where it's like, hey, you need to have this many servings from here. And it's again, it's not a bad prescription, but it's not a mandatory prescription either. Paved Dave is talking about the MMA fighters probably. They cut a lot of water weight to be shredded like that. Yeah, absolutely. If you do see them walking around day to day, like a month before their fight, I think most people would agree that they look pretty good in
I'd also
terms.
say most MMA fighters don't know what the hell they're doing with dieting.
Yeah, yeah. So water cuts are definitely a big thing in fighting sports.
And it's terrible. They would be so bad with it that they would do IV drips and stuff, and it's just like
Mm,
so. I'm so glad they changed the rules on that, man. That's one industry that really needs some help with diet structure. I'll tell you that
mm,
much because he made a comment a little bit below saying that like 10 to 20% year
mm,
round is doable. Dude,
mhm.
even 7 to 10% year round is very doable. You just
Yeah,
either know what you're doing with dieting or you don't. That's the only real difference.
yeah.
I wouldn't let it like hinder you from thinking it's even remotely possible. Most don't choose to be there because
Hmm.
it does take a level of execution to get there, but maintenance on it is I'll say not inherently that difficult once you're there. But 10 to 20% certainly is incredibly easily doable
Yeah,
at all times.
yeah. 100% agree. And yeah, these ranges are definitely a good way to go about I think like aiming or like trying to move towards is to just look
Yeah.
for a range. And if you are using some sort of tech to calculate a body fat percentage, cool. That's I think it's useful. I think there's like a lot of people have scales nowadays that do it. And again, it's not the most perfect way to measure it, but if you're measuring against the same number day over day or month over month, then it does become a useful value. So these are like some of the ranges. So oftentimes people will say, well, if body fat is like a better indicator of like actual adiposity, adiposity just means like how much fat you have, then what body fat range should I be in? And it's you'll find tons of these that suggest what you should be in. It'll break it down by sex, usually male versus female, and then oftentimes by
Mhm.
age. And it's a pretty darn big range. Like if you look here, like
Yeah.
middle, like young adults, 8 to 22, middle age, 10 to 25, right? And this is again a best
I
guess
agree with
because
that, honestly. That looks pretty solid.
yeah, it's you don't have to be at the lower end for this to be a good thing. You don't have to be at the higher end for this to be a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
This is again just the range that correlates with better outcomes. So if you're sitting in this range for your entire life, you'll probably have better outcomes than somebody who's sitting above 25 their entire life. A really big thing here is the chronic exposure to um, high or poor blood lipids is what is like the real mechanistic bad guy here, right? The fat that's sitting on your hips or on your waist or on your thighs or wherever that you don't like, it's not doing anything bad to you, right? It's just sitting there, really.
Mm.
Might even be providing some insulation at times. So like the fat that's sitting on your body is not necessarily the bad guy. I can agree that like some people might look in a mirror and be like, "Oh, I don't like the look of that." Right? But if it's just like the fat sitting there is not a bad guy. The time where like fat itself, like a lot of people I'll pose this question to, again, it's a trick question. Like, is fat bad? And the visceral response is yes. Like, oh yeah, fat is bad. Well, no, it's not. Like, there's a lower end here, right? We recommend 8 and up, or 10 and up, or 20 and up. You don't want to have too little of fat because it is extremely essential. So the fat is not the problem, right? So that's always like an interesting realization for a lot of students. Like when I have this conversation with them, is they'll be like, well, if you're overweight, you have a lot of fat, and that's bad. I'm like, okay, well, why is that bad? And they'll say, well, it causes high blood pressure. I'm like, okay, really? The fat does? How does it cause that? And then they get stuck immediately, right? Because they just have this idea that fat is bad. because they look at the fat and they think, oh, holy smokes, that fat looks bad to me, therefore it must be bad. And again, it's not the bad guy. There is a situation where the fat can be the bad guy, but it's usually at like the like stage 3 and above in terms of obesity. If you're accumulating so much fat that it starts to like press against and choke out certain organs. So this is called visceral fat when you store it very, very centrally and very deep, um, versus like superficial fat, which is what you're more used to seeing and disliking. Like when you look at the fat on your, lots of people, so for females, common places are your upper thighs, your lower belly, and then even like sometimes your arms, right? This is much more superficial fat. And again, that fat is not doing anything quote unquote bad. You just might not like the way it looks. And then it's correlated with some of those bad outcomes. So just kind of strip away this idea that like things are inherently good or bad, I guess, is like a very common theme for probably both of us, I guess.
Yeah. And guys, remember too, because I'm seeing some comments come up about like first steps and stuff. Check out our earlier episodes where we cover this from like the most simplest approach on calorie counting, on energy balance, understanding that energy balance equation, what really goes into it, and where to start there if you're really feeling lost. Because, you know, the whole weight loss, health and wellness industry is super shitty overall. And it's very complex when it doesn't have to be, because they like you guys to buy products that don't actually do much typically. And the point is, we outlined some really key things to focus on and learn and go over first and foremost to really create effective weight loss in a healthy way without needing to do. And we have an episode even solely on, do you even really need to go to the gym ever to do this effectively? And we cover that entirely as well. So a lot of really good stuff in our first episodes. We're kind of doing them in order. And then of course, as we're going through, we're getting to some of the more layered and complex conversations, like BMI, body fat, like institutionally, you know, making improvements to the whole problem as a whole, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, definitely check out our earlier episodes, because we could always say things like, and this is not me calling out Pave Dave, but you know, you always say things like, oh, find out what best works for you with foods and stuff. It's like, yes and no. Like the whole find out what works for you doesn't work if it doesn't actually follow what needs to be followed, you know, which is the energy balance equation. You know, if so-and-so finds out that avocados works really well for them, but they don't know that avocados have 16 grams of fat per serving and they're 40% body fat, and they're still gaining weight because they don't understand energy balance and are very frustrated, that could cause issues down the road too, right? You're not giving somebody the correct start point. Because once you understand the start point and the simplistic nature of it, kind of like with blockchain, it is so simple, and we've made it so layered and complex when it doesn't have to be, right? That's why we love Hex. That's why we like what Richard Hart stands for and conveys to people. We need to do the same thing here. So the start point is so black and white and simple. And then from there, yes, apply what works best for you. That could be certain kind of mealtime. It could be certain kind of foods that you enjoy. It could be based around, you know, pre-existing medical conditions. It could be based around family life things. It can be based around your work-life balance, yada, yada, yada. You know, the list goes on. But we're trying to give you guys the building blocks in these episodes so you know what the start point is and what has to be understood and executed on, regardless of your start point, regardless of where you're at, regardless of your history, all that stuff. It has to start there. So hopefully you guys see some value in some of those earlier episodes. We'll definitely be here. We're doing a bunch of these. And if you have suggestions, please let us know as well.
Yeah. And hit us up with, any and all questions for sure.
Dude, yes. Make it to your 5555s. I know someone had a comment I missed up above.
Yeah, this is one of our biggest sayings in here in the Hex community, especially.
Yeah. Someone said you basically Mount Coiner said you basically described my diet exactly with some small deviations. I guess I'm a product of the system. At least I've got a bunch of 5555s. Dude, honestly, that's such a true statement, because I wouldn't even say you're a product of the system. I guess all of us are in that way. But what I can say is some people got lucky and some people didn't, you know, like my parents always ate out all the time, but I was lucky enough that they put me in sports. Yeah, I mean, I really was, or else I would have definitely gained a ton of weight. And thank God I had good mentors that taught me what I know now, because a lot of people don't have good mentorship. There is no educational structure for this stuff. So we're just kind of shooting from the hip of our side, hoping that things work out. And it's like, guys, no, they're not working out. You know what I mean? But we want Hex in the community of Hex to be the most healthy and transparent and honest people when it comes not only to the cryptocurrency space, but the overall health space too, which I know is a delicate topic, man, but we're just trying to go hardcore into it and see who wants to get involved. Because once the money's there, it don't feels nice if you're in a hospital. I work with a lot of clients that are very wealthy, and they don't care how much money they have. Yeah. They don't.
Yeah. Yeah, what was the next thing? I had queued this up. This is probably a pretty common chart you see. I think in
Oh yeah, I
gyms
haven't
or
seen that one in a hot
everywhere
minute.
when it comes to like body fat percentage. It's like if you're, I think this is a much more condensed version. Just just shoot for, like, if you're outside of this range, I would say aim down, and if you're on the upper end and if you're on the lower end, aim up. That's, you can make it as simple or as complex as it needs to be. When you see these charts in gyms, it's like, are you like, if you're outside of this range, is it's bad? Again, just be careful with like what the actual implications mean.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. This is a correlation data. I'll just try and rip through. I think, Ryan, you had like a lot of the exact same sources I had pulled up here. So like CDC and WHO. The big one here is that from 2000 to 2017, we moved from 30% prevalence to 42%. So almost a 50% increase in obesity prevalence. That
That's in one
is,
oh that's in 10 20
right.
years.
That's in 10, 17 years or so,
Gotcha.
right? And that looks to be increasing at a faster and faster rate,
Oh yeah.
which is, yeah, no good at all. Some of the WHO data is like worldwide. So this is taking into account everybody, right? If you take into account the developed world, it gets even worse. Worldwide, obesity has tripled since 75.
Which that's
23
crazy, man, because these are countries that
tripled.
people would not suspect to be
Mm,
obese. But
mm,
it's like, dude, all it takes is some really good tasting food and
mm-hmm.
activity levels to go a lot lower and then have that systematically work its way through each generation. So it's not just the US guys, can't make fun of
Yep,
the US anymore. It's basically everybody.
yep.
Like it's uncommon now to have a country that's not obese.
Yeah, everyone is following this trend, and it is starting. Yeah, it's moving into the, what I don't even know if they call, if they use the term third world anymore, but the less developed world, I'll say.
Yeah.
Right?
Which
So
is really
most,
important, I think. It's important to point that out because people do not know
mhm,
that that's going on. And that's where I hate to say it, a lot of the virus, that we've been dealing with the past few years, those countries have also been impacted. Like the data does follow the same trends that America has followed too.
yeah,
So it's just important to know that we're not the only ones anymore.
yeah, and yeah, the United States is definitely, and like basically all of like the big first world countries or developed countries are definitely kind of like leading this trend, but every single country is following it. This is the crazy one that's turned like pretty recently, is that the majority of the world are in countries where overweight obesity kills more than underweight. That's a pretty big change. And
I got a good comment there from Pave Dave. I figured you wanted to touch on.
oh, I think I did see it. I'm going to pull it up here in a second. So that's WHO. Here's some. I'm from Canada, so this is some. Canada is not immune, right? There's no country that's immune to this, really. It seems like a lot of the Asian countries like do really, really well. Like Japan in particular has done really, really well. Um, but no country is really immune to this trend. Some of them are definitely uh, in a better standing than others. But so Canada, if you look here, total, like we've got 70% of males deemed overweight or obese. That's brutal. Here's just like a Google search for obesity trends. If you look at any single one of these, we're going up and to the right, up and to the right, up and to the right. This
Dude, the
one that's
worst part
going,
about that line chart you just had up, if you can go back to the other one,
this one,
guys, look at the age ranges. If not
yeah,
for yourself, look at what's going on with the kids, man. I shouldn't have to have a
hmm,
13-year-old boy who's 240 pounds that wants
yeah,
to work with me. That shouldn't happen, man. Think about how tough it was when we were kids, and now think about what the kids now are going through with everything that's going on and the schooling systems and all the setbacks there. Plus this, dude, if we can't get our act together in the 30 to 60-year-old bracket, then that's why I told you exercise. I was like, fuck it. Start young. Whatever has to happen has to happen. Like honestly, we need to start somewhere, and people who are actually willing and wanting to do it. Because
hmm,
it's crazy, man. That's all those lines except for one are young kids, 2 to 5, 12 to 18. I don't know,
hmm,
6 to 11. So it's basically all children except the light blue there. Every one of those lines is going up and to the right for the most part, outside of 2 to 5 years old. Great. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You shouldn't even be sniffing stuff like this until maybe your 30s potentially. And even then, that's only because we don't teach anybody about this stuff. So that is scary.
yeah,
That one
man,
specifically.
yeah, and they're all doing it. They're all,
Wow,
so
those
like
are,
this.
yeah.
It's an extremely well-known trend, and like where the shit is going to hit the fan is when this chart starts to turn down, because it's already starting to turn down. This is the life expectancy in the United States right now.
Oh
I
wow,
I
that's a
think
scary chart.
I think we already technically hit. I don't have like the year by year data up here in front of me, but I actually think we already
Is that
hit a
62? Does it show it right? It's getting close to 62 and then it comes down. I can't quite tell what that number is.
where, sorry?
On the age where it gets up to and then it starts to trend down a little bit. Is that the 60s on the Y column? Yeah, what's that number over there?
It's gonna be somewhere around 70. Like I don't know what the or the life expectancy is
Does it
in
even hit
USA.
70 over there? I thought it looks like 60s. Or does
No,
it say
it
70?
should be above that.
Oh, that is 70. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, my
this is
eyes.
70. That's okay. This is 70, this is 80. So it's approaching 80 for females. It's somewhere around like maybe 75 for guys as of 2018. I think we technically hit like the first year where we did have a decrease in longevity or life expectancy, but like this is like one that I'm watching like as this shit continues, right? Like this is gonna turn down, and it's gonna turn it might turn down like steep. Like when I hear you say like rug pull, like the ultimate rug pull, like this is what is I think is gonna hit the fan somewhere somewhere like pretty hard, I think. I don't see any other way of getting around this.
I see an increasingly number of people dying around the 60-year mark due
Hmm.
to high blood pressure, diabetes, and
Oh yeah, that was
obesity in general.
the last one I was gonna pull up. I brought this up in our very first episode ever. This is from my thesis presentation. So back in the day, so this was what 2014 data. So then versus now, fucking nothing had changed, right? Heart disease still biggest killer, cancer, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, diabetes. So some of the biggest ones here that are directly influenced by lifestyle: heart disease, stroke, diabetes. You could argue more than that, but like um, it's pretty well determined that these three are for sure influenced. Now, it might be out of your control, but for the majority of people, it is within your
Yeah,
control.
you can't go off of like, oh, I'm type 1 or something like that. It's
Hmm.
just the numbers don't support that. That's like a true common trend right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But the prevalence of it is actually going up because more and more people are susceptible to getting diabetes if you were, born
Hmm.
into a family with those habits, right?
Yep.
And generationally, that those habits, whether it be the eating habits, the lower activity levels, whatever, so we are seeing that trend is happening.
Yeah. And then this is very similar to those heat maps that you brought up. Is back in 1990, I think the craziest state was Mississippi with 15 to 19%
We don't have
obese.
one state in the green now
Now
anymore.
there's not a single state in the green. This used to be the worst. Now it's not even on the chart. It's not even here. It's crazy. Like the increase here. This is obesity now. This is so greater than 30. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So yeah, let me go find that comment from Paved
And real quick
Dave.
too, human hex trafficker, brother. If you're pre-diabetic, you still got time, man. You still got time. Check out
Hmm.
our first episodes on calorie counting. Check out our first episodes on overall activity levels, ways to get that started quickly and effectively, and get really excited about this because with proper charting, which we do cover a couple times in our initial episodes, bro, you're gonna crush it. So if you're not fully diabetic yet, that's still reversible, man. So keep
Yep,
your head up.
100%. Paved Dave, doesn't matter what foods you eat. If you're producing a lot of cortisol, your body will turn it to sugar and you'll get fat. Um, I will reject that idea as a whole in a respectful manner, sir. I think in the context of a calorie surplus, you'll get fat no matter. So cortisol can create like a few, I would say, hurdles, but if you're elevated cortisol, you can lose weight. It's not preventing you from losing weight. It's not preventing you from gaining weight. It can definitely have an impact on your substrate utilization. But Dave, so maybe you have seen some studies or you've been fed some studies that people think confirm that, hey, cortisol is the bad guy when it comes to creating um, fatness or creating body fat or leading to body fat gain, when I do not believe that's the case. So if you do have uh, some references or some studies, or maybe it's just some information that you've been told that that is what's causing that, I would love to see it, look at it, and like have a conversation about it. But cortisol is not necessarily going to turn, like you will turn most of the food that you ingest to sugar, like no matter what, right? Like glucose is the end product of a lot of the inputs. If you don't eat any carbs, you can still go all the way down to the end of the line and create sugar because you will need sugar. You must create glucose for certain things. Your body will turn it to sugar and you'll get fat. So outside of a calorie surplus, I disagree. I'm not saying that cortisol has like zero effect on things. It's just like it for sure does matter what what you eat does have an effect like regardless of cortisol. So it's yeah, cortisol is not the bad guy as far as I know. So if you have some info, I would love to look at it a little bit further. MT Coiner, thanks very much. We're happy to be doing it. We really enjoy, like I enjoy hopping on here and just really talking shit, going over whatever the heck you guys want to talk about or whatever our little topic is for the day. It's
Yeah.
really enjoyable for me to just really, I don't know, like try to break down like some of the, I guess like pervasive ideas that are just like considered truth when it's like, well, that's there's so much nuance and context that's required here that it's really insane, like the amount of like time that needs to be spent, I think. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles to like moving the needle on a lot of stuff. Obesity equals you eat more than you should. Stop eating too much, buy a hex and stake it for Cuatro Cinco. Then after 15 years, you can buy a store and get obesity for free without paying. So yeah, the fundamental idea here is relating directly back to energy balance. That's kind of what we predicate a whole bunch of our shit on, right? If you eat more than, or so if you intake more energy than you spend, right, your weight, your balance will go up. If you save more than you spend, your balance will go up. It's the exact same principle. MT Coiners, is this for Montana? MT? I think that must be what it's for, hey? I've been hoping to run across the guy who cuts hexagonal gemstones.
I took it
Uh,
as like Mount Coiner, like a
mm,
mountain almost, but
mm.
can't tell.
Here we go, Pave Dave again. You can be very thin and not fat at all. Doesn't mean you're healthier. Agree. The crackhead that's shredded and skinny is not healthier than the fat guy with 40% body fat, not trying to be funny. Um, hmm. So I'm just going to remove crackhead from this statement and say the shredded guy that is skinny is not healthier than the fat guy with 40%. That statement can be true still. Like even if we remove crackhead, because like I'm not gonna like try to measure somebody who's on hard drugs versus somebody who's not. But if you're extremely skinny or shredded, yeah, you can be less healthy than somebody who is quote unquote overweight or even quote unquote obese, right? A lot of the data that we're covering here when it comes to obesity is correlational data. So it shouldn't be thrown out completely. Like a lot of people want to take the BMI metric and be like, it's useless. Fuck it. Like, well, it's not useless. It's definitely a good indicator, but there's more to the story than just BMI. So as soon as if you know that you're super shredded and maybe underweight, might be a good time to go get things checked, specifically a blood panel. I think that's step one. Or if you're overweight, 40%, that might be a good time to go get checked, specifically a blood panel. But yeah, so I agree there with what you're saying, Dave, for the most part. I guess the caveat about the crackhead. Fix your mental and physical health first, then you'll just want to eat healthier. Not sure. I think I agree. Yeah. I mean, eating healthier, I guess like these are all tied together probably for a lot of people. This is what Ryan was talking earlier. If you are pre-diabetic, you can absolutely move in the other direction. Even if you're fully diabetic, you can you can um, you can impact your insulin sensitivity and your fasting glucose level in a manner that takes you out of that classification. It's hard, like the further and further you get into it, the harder it is, and you might require like some actual prescribed drugs at a certain level, but you can definitely move in the other direction. It has been shown. You can do it. So yeah, don't get down on yourself, and it's one step at a time. Small moves, the accumulation of small habits will add up to your outcome. And yeah, don't expect things to happen overnight. If you are 30 years old, it's taken you 15, 20 years of consistent habits to get to whatever situation you're in. It'll take some time to move out or to move in a direction that you might want to move. Yeah, people reverse diabetes all the time. I don't know if I'd say real quick. I'd say be careful about your expectations for how fast, but salt, I don't know this diet. No salt, oil, sugar. I feel like that's going to be an extremely difficult diet to adhere to. So I'm not going to say too much about it. No salt. Salt is essential. You need salt. Oil, tough to get by without oil. I think most things you use probably have oil. Sugar, we just had a lovely episode about sugar. I don't think it's a bad guy, but if you're consuming a lot of it, it can definitely inhibit some of your progress. Honestly, the sooner I can quit my job and change my home, the sooner I can change my lifestyle. I'm staked out pretty long since day one. I'll have my day soon enough. Delayed gratification. Yeah, buddy. But at least my mama was not a crackhead. Yeah, I don't really want to comment on the crack situation.
Yeah, a lot of comments on crack at the end here. Probably a good
Yeah,
way to finish it up, though.
yeah,
Good little episode on trends, guys. Maybe some of it a little bit depressing in that way, but knowledge is power, right?
yeah,
Just like with the crypto space, man. You can
yeah.
only be
It's
given the truth, and you have to do what you want to do with it. But you have a really great support group, at least here with me in Exercise. You guys can find us on Twitter and ask us questions, or just put comments here. We're still waiting for you guys. This is the best time to do it when we're still kind of like, what, 10 people watching us right now?
yeah, yeah. Data. It's just data at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
try not to be attached to that data. I know that is easier said than done for many, many people, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Trends and really trying to define obesity. If you had any like any preconceptions or misconceptions about it, hopefully we cleared some of those up.
Yeah. Or where it's going, because that is what it is, gents and ladies, if you're in here.
Yeah, yeah, it's
But yeah,
not looking great.
and we'll update you if we see the trends correct. Oh man, I mean, we'll be the first ones to talk about it. I know I will for sure. But man, you're gonna see you'd have to see some crazy policy come in to shift that, like absolute government overreach of how many calories people can eat, like crazy stuff like that would have to happen.
Yeah,
Which would not happen. So I'm never gonna say never on something, but you get the point. Probably not likely anytime real soon. But yeah, I'm good if you are, man.
I'm good.
Wrap
I'm
things
good
up.
too. Yeah,
Close
so
out. You said it was our 10th episode,
yeah,
right?
episode number
Lucky
10
number 10. Okay.
in the books. We will be here again next week, March 21st, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Come on back. Ask us some questions at Pave Dave. I'd like to see the information about cortisol being what makes us fat and not the energy balance equation. So bring that and we can chat about that, inspect it. Watch for a topic sometime to be scheduled next weekend. Saturday, Sunday is usually when we schedule it. We'll also take suggestions anytime.
Always.
But that's it. I think it for both of us tonight. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Absolutely.
Later.